Since 1970, Pioneer Acres, a museum of vintage agricultural equipment in rural Alberta, has put on an annual 3-day farm show. Many of the museum's members bring as much of their old farm equipment as they can and display and run it for the public to see. "2021 was their 51st annual show, and for all the history buffs and fans of old iron, it certainly didn't disappoint. Everywhere you stood, it was workhorses from the past as far as the eye could see. Many of these machines served Alberta and other Canadian family farms for many years, and some are still part of their original families. Perhaps the best part was knowing that all of these fine pieces of equipment still run. Most of the equipment that Pioneer Acres owns predates 1970, especially this machine. This is their 55 horsepower K-Steam traction engine. Pioneer Acres acquired this piece in the early 70s and got it running in 1975. In the early 90s, it received a proper restoration and has been operating at many events held by the museum ever since. The very first steam tractors were stationary engines mounted on wheels or skids and hauled out to fields or other parts of the farm by horse to perform their tasks. Later models such as this one were self-propelled, which made their list of jobs much longer. As useful and as powerful as these machines were, their production was phased out in the 1920s, and they were replaced with internal combustion engine tractors. During the show weekend, the tractor can be seen driving around in between its demonstrations. Notice the two chains going to the front wheels. That is the steering mechanism. No power steering for these machines. Here at Pioneer Acres, this old case is still used to perform a handful of tasks that these machines were once known for, including one of the more common tasks, threshing. Threshing is the process of separating the edible part of grain plants from the straw. Long ago, it used to be done by hand, but later these big threshing machines made the job much easier. It uses the steam traction engine's flywheel to drive a large belt, often made of leather, and attaches to the drive wheel of the thresher. Notice how the belt is crisscrossed. This is so it doesn't slowly creep to one side of the pulleys and slip off when in motion. For wheels with guides or flanges, this step was unnecessary. At least 5 men were needed to run this operation. 2 to keep an eye on the steam tractor, and 3 to run the thresher. 2 of them forked the grain into the machine, and 1 loaded the truck or horse cart and kept an eye on the hay pile around back of the thresher. Nowadays, the modern combine harvests and separates the grain all by itself as it drives through the fields. Operations like this one are now a thing of the past. As the threshing demo was in full swing, other, even older farming methods were also being demonstrated. Tractors and farm machines are a main focus at Pioneer Acres, but they're not the only focus.
I drive a big Freightliner and I made my last payment today.
Trucks are another huge part of this place. They even have a club dedicated to truck enthusiasts. Everything from farm pickups to big rigs can be seen here.
She's a believer. I got the Freightliner fever.
Many gems lay inside buildings like the Pioneer Truck Museum. This 1926 Chevrolet Superior Model X is certainly one of them. This truck was originally sold as a chassis. When it left the factory, a Martin Perry cab was installed. This old Chevy is from Oregon and was owned by a college professor who quit his job, loaded up his family and all their belongings before immigrating to Canada. The truck stayed with them on their new homestead in Hanna, Alberta. A collector got hold of the truck after it had fallen into neglect. He restored it in 1980. It is now owned by one of the truck enthusiasts here at Pioneer Acres, who has been the proud owner of it since 2002. Beside the Chevy was this 1939 Ford, which spent its first 63 years in Fair Oaks, California. It was moved to Washington in 2004, where a longtime mechanic restored it as a retirement project and was completed in 2007. The fine Ford joined Pioneer Acres in 2017 after it was purchased by a fellow in Calgary, Alberta. He had it put in the Pioneer Acres Truck Museum so everyone could see and enjoy it as much as he does. From old pickups to grain trucks, from vintage Freightliners to old pumper fire trucks, Pioneer Acres has an old truck for everyone. The icing on the cake is most, if not all, of their pieces run and drive. Many are fired up and can be seen driving around during the annual show, like this 1937 Diamond T Model 80S. Diamond T was an American company that specialized in manufacturing commercial and military trucks. This Diamond T is an excellent example of tow trucks that could be seen in operation throughout the 1940s. This truck came from the Lacombe County area in Alberta and had no box when acquired. Curly Waltz, the truck's owner, restored it from the ground up with the help of a man by the name of Al Banks, who constructed the truck's new box. The winch and wrecker crane were installed after the completion of the box. Next door to the Pioneer Truck Museum sits some older and quite unique pieces, including not one but 4 Mack Bulldog trucks. The name Bulldog was given to these trucks by the British during the First World War. Their unique appearance and extreme durability, combined with their similarity in looks to a British Bulldog, meant the name fit nicely. The Mack Company adopted the Bulldog as their trademark and part of their logo soon after. This Mack worked for the Turner Valley Oilfield Services out of Turner Valley, Alberta, and this one served the U.S. Army. Like the neighboring truck building, Everything in this room runs and drives as well. It's not every day you see some of these machines. This 1911 Packard Model TCD is one of only 10 chain-driven Packards built between 1911 and 1915 to survive today. After 1915, Packard switched to drive shafts instead of chain drives to power the rear wheels. This particular truck managed to survive 85 years before being acquired and completely restored by the late Ron Carey, who had a very unique collection. For those who like seeing history in action, Pioneer Acres puts on a truck and car parade during their show, where members show off trucks from the museum as well as their personal collections.
We got a big old convoy rolling through the night. Yeah, we got a big old convoy, ain't she a beautiful sight? Come on and join our convoy, ain't nothing gonna get in our way. We're gonna pull this convoy across the USA.
Breaker there, Big Ben, and there's the nut.
One at a time, each piece is driven past the bleachers, as a brief synopsis of the unit's history is shared by the announcer. All of them have a story, but some are just cool to see in operation. Here is a 1949 Mercury M68 grain truck that resides in Balzac, Alberta. An interesting one was this 1899 Locomobile horseless carriage. Currently, it is battery powered, but future plans are to put it back to steam power, as these carriages originally were.
1899 Locomobile horseless carriage.
This is an original 1981 International F4370 Eagle. It also has its original horn pair and sports a rather fitting black and yellow paint scheme. Following the Eagle was this nice-looking 1975 Dodge D300 tow truck from Calgary, complete with twin 4-lens rotary beacons.
Got a little tank working there, I think. 15-speed Fuller, 12,000-pound front axle, 42.
This old International has its air conditioning on. For those who don't know, back in those days the front window would be able to be pushed open slightly at the bottom to allow airflow into the cab. Not as comfortable as the AC systems of today, but it did take the edge off of the heat.
Also got the dig brake.
Lots of really nice trucks and cars run in the parade. It's also never the same, as each day more vehicles are added while others choose not to run a second or third day.
He's driving this car, he bought that in February.
When the parade came to a close, all the trucks and cars were put back on display around the museum grounds so folks could get a closer look at them. As well as old vehicles, the museum has a few stationary exhibits that they operate during the show weekend. This is the Pioneer Acres Blacksmith Shop. One large hit-and-miss engine powers all the machines here. All the different tools and machines are driven by belts connected to the master pulley system that is driven by the large engine. This was early in the morning, so neither the engine nor the pulley system were running, but they were heating some iron on the coal fire, preparing to get to work. Beside the blacksmith shop sits the steam engine building. This building has two operating stationary steam engines powered by one large vertical boiler. This boiler operates at around 90 psi and is wood-fired. This is the automatic injector located behind the boiler. This little contraption injects water into the large boiler to create the steam necessary to run the engines. To the right of the boiler sits one of the stationary engines. This single-cylinder powerhouse used to power the coal mine in Carbon, Alberta. When the mine closed, the engine was purchased by a farmer, but it didn't leave Carbon at that time. Instead, it was left out in the elements, and after a decade or two, it became buried underground thanks to the high winds here in Alberta. When Pioneer Acres opened up the steam building, they wanted a second engine to run off the boiler. The farmer spoke up and told them he had one. So a team went out to Carbon, complete with metal detectors, and dug it up. It was fixed up, restored, and placed on display in operational condition for the public to see and enjoy. The motion of these engines is a lot like a graceful dance. Steam moves the piston and piston rod back and forth. The piston rod connects to the crosshead, which is the large square piece shown here. The crosshead joins to the connecting rod that is able to move up and down with the help of a pivot joint. The connecting rod drives the crank or drive wheel. The drive wheel has a weight opposite the rod joint so it stays in balance as it rotates. The crank connects to the flywheel via a crankshaft. Between the flywheel and drive wheel attached to the crankshaft is the eccentric rod. The eccentric is responsible for the cylinder's timing. Every stroke of a steam engine is a power stroke, shown here by the cylinder cocks. The eccentric helps make sure the right amount of steam enters each side of the cylinder from the steam chest when it needs to. The eccentric is usually about a quarter turn out of sync with the main connecting rod. The flywheel on these engines helps the rotation of the crank and engine itself using centrifugal force, so not as much power is required. It was also the part of the engine that connected to whatever the engine drove. Notice the large spring going around inside the flywheel. That is the governor. A governor maintains a steam engine's speed by regulating how much steam enters the steam chest and when. This spring and weight governor is the newer and much safer variant. Its older relative was the ball governor, which was belt operated. These were used on machines like steam tractors, but had a few issues. Ball governors relied on gravity, and when they weren't near perfectly vertical, they could cause the engine to speed up or slow down, forcing the operator to adjust accordingly. Another risk was the belt that drives the ball governor could break, causing the engine to spin out of control. These weight and spring governors don't have those issues, and were a lot safer and much more efficient for all involved. The other engine here, left of the boiler, was used to run a compressor of a refrigeration plant and works very similarly to the coal mine engine. Manufactured in 1897, this engine uses its flywheel to drive a large belt which connects to the compressor. They also have a handful of other steam-related goodies on display here, including the dynamo generator off of a steam locomotive, which would have powered the locomotive's lights. They also have the technical plate off of a steam burrow crane. The 2021 show was also the first show that the public could see Pioneer Acres' newest exhibit, the Grain Academy. Pioneer Acres purchased the Grain Academy and moved it out here after the original one in Calgary was forced out by the Stampede Board. Part of the exhibit is this 30 by 16.5 foot HO scale model railway, showing how grain gets from the fields to the world market. There will be a in-depth Ghost Pine Film Productions documentary released on that model railway in the future. This new exhibit was a hit among the public. Many said they learned all kinds of things about grain and Canadian agriculture that they never knew before. A show at a museum focusing heavily on agriculture would not be complete without somewhere to demo some of the tractors. That place was the 2021 Parade of Power. Like the truck and car parade, owners and operators of vintage tractors would drive them out in between the stands, while a short history of the piece was shared. And what better to lead the parade than Pioneer Acres' own Case Steam Tractor?
This, ladies and gentlemen, is the 2021 Parade of Power. This will be anything and everything agricultural.
Being a Canadian show, there were plenty of cockshut tractors. Cockshut was a large manufacturer of tractors and other farm machines based out of Brantford, Ontario. When they first began, they didn't have any designs of their own, so they became a distributor of a select group of Alice Chalmers tractors painted in Cockshut colors. Cockshut also took over the Oliver line in 1935. This was certainly the quietest tractor here. Its owner converted it completely to electric. The batteries are stored where the engine once was. It may not rumble and shake like the rest, but it still has some pretty good pulling power for its size, shown as it pulls a small sled. There were plenty of old hit-and-miss engine tractors running in the parade, like this massive 1911 Rumley oil-pulled Model E. Weighing in at 29,000 pounds, it runs off kerosene and water, and would have no issues hauling a 30-horsepower load for 10 hours straight. To start this monster, you need to step on the big flywheel on the left side and push down to get it turning. Then remove your foot before the spokes catch it and send you for a ride. A couple other oil pulls were also in the parade. Though they weren't as large as the Model E, they still looked and sounded just as great. Similar to the Rumleys was this 1916-built Case 2040. This model series was produced between 1912 and 1920, and in 1913 was awarded 2 gold medals for fuel efficiency at a contest in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And what would a tractor parade be without some green and yellow? Seen here is a John Deere 730, leading 3 John Deere 820s. A rather unique tractor was this 1918 GMC Samson Sieve Grip. 3 cast iron wheels are the most distinct thing about this machine. While quite decent tractors, sieve grips didn't sell well and were discontinued in 1923. They use a hand-operated clutch that takes no time to grab, so these machines were either moving or not, with quite fast stops and starts. This mean-looking machine is a Versatile, likely a 125. Versatile is a Canadian tractor manufacturer based out of Winnipeg, Manitoba. Founded in 1966, the company is still going strong today, continuing their line of tractors, combines, and other farm machines. In the 1960s and early 70s, Versatile held 70% of the four-wheel drive tractor market. With all these fine machines running around on the museum's dirt roads during this dry summer weekend, clouds of dust are inevitable. That's where this 1979 Kenworth water sprayer comes in. This truck is a model IW 923, and it originally served the Don Beddoes Construction Company. It was used as a watering truck during highway construction projects and was restored by the construction company's shop. Being a big fan of Pioneer Acres, it was Don's final wish that the truck be donated to the museum. On August 8, 2009, Don's wife and daughter presented the truck to the museum. Pioneer Acres has used this good-looking truck for dust control during their annual events ever since. And that sometimes means briefly interrupting some of the demonstrations. Here, the Kenworth is seen watering down the runway, keeping dust down for the final event of the day, the tractor pull. Divided by weight class, this event shows how much power these old tractors have as they pull a special sled along. As soon as the load gets too much and the wheels start slipping, that tractor's pull is over. Their distance is recorded and the sled is pulled back to the start for the next tractor in line. This 1958 Massey Harris 555 managed 90 feet at the pull. This tractor is from Elnora, Alberta. This 1954 John Deere R topped out at 95 feet 7 inches. Leading the Class 5 section of the pull was the event announcer himself on his 9,060-pound cockshut. Dave is a big fan of cockshut tractors and owns a number of different models. Today, he started the Class 5s out at 113 feet 10 inches. That's starting number didn't last long, however, as this International 650 just would not stop. 154 feet, 11 inches. As the last of the tractor pull finished up, that put a close to the Pioneer Acres 51st Annual Show. If you're ever in the area during the first weekend in August and love old iron, you should definitely come see it for yourself. You won't be disappointed.